Chasing success often pushes it further away. Think about the person who refreshes their follow account every 5 minutes, sacrifices sleep to answer one more message, and ends the week feeling hollow despite making progress. That tight churn before a big presentation feels familiar. Pressure narrows your thinking, you second-guess every line, and the result is a robotic delivery that impresses no one and teaches you nothing. You notice people who obsess over metrics stop taking creative risks. A writer who rewrites the first paragraph forever, or a founder who pivots at the first dip. Both are trading small experiments for the illusion of control, and because they avoid the messy middle, real growth stalls. There is another pattern that actually pulls success closer. Stay for a few minutes and you'll see clear examples of small process shifts, what to pay attention to, how loosening the chokehold on outcomes frees better decisions, and which simple habits let progress happen naturally instead of forcing it. The pressure paradox. How wanting tightens the grip. People tend to perform worse when they care most. That's not just a feeling. Cognitive research shows that intense desire flips on self-monitoring and thought suppression, which backfires. When you push yourself to avoid mistakes, you end up noticing every tiny twitch, and the very thing you try to suppress becomes louder in your mind. Think of a pianist who suddenly watches their fingers instead of listening. The passage that flowed yesterday turns clumsy today because conscious control interrupts the muscle memory. The more success matters, the more the brain swaps effortless skill for rigid oversight, and that swap is a direct path to error. Pressure narrows attention. Under pressure, people shift from automatic, procedural thinking into explicit, step-by-step processing, and working memory fills up fast when every outcome feels make or break. A golfer who normally trusts rhythm will, at a tournament's final tee, start counting wrist angles and foot placement until the swing collapses. Moderate arousal can help focus. It sharpens attention and boosts motivation. But once arousal climbs past a certain point, you lose flexibility, decision time stretches, and performance collapses in ways that feel sudden and unavoidable. High stakes amplify the fear of failure. When success becomes a marker of identity or status, decision-making tilts toward avoidance. Safer choices, rehearsed scripts, fewer experiments. A founder who delays investor calls because each pitch feels like public judgment misses chances to iterate and improve. And a basketball player who refuses a contested drive will never get better at finishing under pressure. That retreat protects ego in the short term but shrinks the range of practice and feedback, which lowers actual chances of achieving the success being chased. The words people use make it feel heavier. Saying first must or first have to ties outcomes to self-worth and turns a task into a threat to identity, which raises cortisol and ramps up self-scrutiny. A student who defines themselves by a grade freezes during an exam and remembers fewer facts. A salesperson who equates every call with destiny will speak less naturally and listen less, which reduces rapport. When wanting morphs into a weight like that, behavior becomes cautious and rigid, creativity dries up, and paradoxically the very success that mattered most drifts farther away. Chasing outcomes and losing touch with the process. People often fixate on the visible outcome and forget everything that leads up to it. One runner first coached would stare at the clock every few minutes during a race, and that constant checking tore her attention from pacing, breathing, and how her legs felt, which meant she tightened up and slowed down in the final miles. It feels like control, but the more you stare at results, the more your performance becomes reactive instead of steady. Students chasing grades instead of concepts show the same pattern. A college student might memorize formulas right before an exam and walk away with an A but no transferable understanding, which makes the next course harder and slows long-term progress. Short-term wins pop. Long-term competence slips away when learning becomes a checklist rather than an unfolding process. Creators who optimize for clicks and likes change what they make. A photographer who posts only the most popular subject matter because it gets engagement will pull away from experimenting with lighting and composition, and that narrows their artistic growth even as their numbers rise. Rewards can reinforce the wrong habits, and when the external applause fades, the work that was sacrificed to win it is harder to recover. People who keep attention on steps instead of outcomes tend to adapt better. A software team that focuses on clean reviews, user testing, and incremental fixes ships more reliable features and accumulates useful practices, which reduces the frantic last-minute pushes to meet a release date. Small, repeatable actions build skill and confidence, and that steady accumulation usually produces the outcomes people wanted in the first place. Fear, overfocus, and the patterns that sabotage progress. Performance anxiety narrows attention and makes routine skills feel foreign. A musician who can run a passage in practice hits a blank on stage because the brain shifts from procedural control to conscious monitoring, and that shift interrupts automaticity. It happens in boardrooms too, where a presenter rehearses every word and then stumbles when a question pulls them out of the script. The direct result is not lack of talent, but a shift in how the mind allocates resources. Overfocus on a single outcome creates a kind of tunnel vision that blinds people to useful signals. A product team that concentrates only on feature perfection can miss early user feedback, and months of internal polishing end up far from what customers actually need. Sales representatives who obsess over closing every call perfectly may sound rigid and miss cues that could lead to an easier, different sale. Narrow attention reduces adaptability, and reduced adaptability increases the gap between intention and result. Perfectionism, checking, and procrastination often look like discipline but act like safety behaviors. A student rewriting the same paragraph for hours is avoiding the possibility of a mediocre grade by seeking an impossible standard, which delays submission and freezes learning. Constantly rechecking spreadsheets gives a temporary reassurance, yet it trains the brain to depend on ritual rather than judgment, slowing decisions and lowering confidence. Those patterns produce short-term relief while steadily shrinking the window for real progress. These habits feed on themselves in a simple loop. Fear prompts control, control breeds rigidity, rigidity creates failure or delay, and failure magnifies fear. A founder who delays launching because of worries about negative reviews misses market momentum and then points to the late launch as proof that the delay was necessary, which only reinforces the next delay. Over time, the pattern hardens into a default approach, attempt to eliminate risk by tightening grip, and the result is less movement toward the goal, not more. When metrics replace meaning, the cost of external measures. Many workplaces now judge success by what can be counted: conversion rates, test scores, average handle time, follow accounts. Those figures make managers feel like they have control because they turn messy effort into neat charts, but the neatness hides what actually matters to users and teams. In meetings, you can see the tension when stories about customers are trimmed to one slide of KPIs. Concrete examples show the shift: schools narrowing curricula to what appears on standardized tests, startups prioritizing monthly active users over long-term retention. When a measure becomes the target, people start optimizing for the measure instead of the underlying goal. That's why teachers teach to the test rather than to critical thinking, and why call centers push scripted phrases to lower talk time even when customers leave confused. Sales teams close lots of small deals to hit quota, which looks great on the dashboard but leaves the company with churn and poor lifetime value. The cause is straightforward: incentives shape behavior. The effect is that the metric improves while the mission suffers. You can tell when meaning has been crowded out because conversations shift from what helped the customer to did we beat the number. Motivation changes with that shift. Creators on social platforms chase watch time and thumbnails because those metrics reward visibility, and in doing so many reduce the variety and depth of their work. Engineers focus on ticket counts and velocity points and sometimes slice features into trivial increments to show progress, which gives the illusion of productivity while slowing meaningful releases. There's a social cost too, and it grows over time. People become cynical when their efforts are judged by proxies that miss the point, and that cynicism leads to gaming, shortcuts, and burnout. Managers under pressure tighten targets and employees respond by polishing numbers rather than improving outcomes. The immediate effect is improved metrics. The longer-term effect is lost trust, lower quality, and fewer breakthroughs. Concrete consequences appear everywhere. Customer complaints spike despite higher satisfaction scores. Product launches hit deadlines with a hollow feature set, and teams cling to safe bets instead of solving the hard problems that actually move the needle. Gentle shifts, practical turns from wanting to becoming. Chasing a goal can tighten the chest and shrink attention to a single prize. That narrowing is common. When someone fixates on an outcome, getting promoted, winning a contest, landing a client, their attention becomes outcome-driven and small errors that used to be harmless feel catastrophic, which raises stress and actually interferes with the skills they need in the moment. Think of a pianist who starts listening to the audience instead of the music and suddenly muffs a familiar passage. The cause is straightforward. Outcome attachment produces pressure, pressure disrupts automatic skill, and disruption makes the outcome less likely. Wanting success often makes people measure themselves against future results instead of present actions. A software engineer who wants a raise might obsess over titles and emails, and that checking habit fragments deep work and slows feature development. When focus moves off practice and onto proof, growth stalls because the feedback loop is broken. Attention no longer feeds improving work, it feeds anxiety about recognition. Shifting attention to daily practice and craft removes that loop of worry and allows incremental competence to accumulate quietly. People respond to identity cues more reliably than to distant rewards. Labeling oneself as someone who writes every morning changes the meaning of a missed day, while the label aspiring author can feel like a yearbook caption you never earned. A concrete example: a journalist who keeps a single notebook by the bed and writes one paragraph before coffee finds that the habit outlasts motivational spikes. The reason is simple. Identity-linked routines reduce the ego stake in each individual outcome, and steady repetition rewires behavior without the toxic spike of needing each session to prove worth. Small environment changes can tilt behavior without drama. A designer who removes social app notifications during afternoon blocks gets 2 fewer interruptions per hour and finishes deeper drafts more often. That's a practical nudge, not a pep talk. These tweaks work by lowering friction for the desired action and raising friction for distraction, which shifts energy from resisting to doing. Over weeks, those tiny shifts compound into credibility with yourself, and credibility looks a lot like becoming. Curiosity replaces trembling expectation with steady inquiry. A scientist who treats failed trials as sources of information rather than moral failure stays in the lab longer and learns faster. This bend toward learning softens the fear of looking small in public because the aim becomes information gathering instead of proof gathering. The result is resilience. Experiments continue, practice accumulates, and progress appears as a byproduct rather than a performance. Small celebrations anchor the process without inflating the ego. Noticing one improved paragraph, one clean piece of code, or one clearer musical phrase signals competence to yourself, and that signal encourages repetition without the drama of chasing a single trophy. Over time, those tiny validations build a sense of becoming that is steadier than the high of sporadic success. The practical turn is gentle. Replace desperate wanting with quiet, repeatable moves, and watch the work you do begin to produce what once only seemed attainable. You wake up thinking about success and your chest tightens. That tightness makes every choice feel like a test, so you check metrics, tweak details, and sometimes freeze, like staring at a blank post because you worry about how many likes it will get. When you treat success like a checklist, every tiny outcome becomes proof you're either winning or failing, and people start over-optimizing plans instead of finishing work. An app never launches because features are endlessly tweaked. A writer keeps rewriting the first chapter. That over-optimization pushes success further away. You chase other people's applause more than your own progress. The result is predictable. You avoid messy experiments that could teach real lessons. So a musician who trims every rough take misses the raw moments listeners actually connect with. It feels like success is a moving target, always just out of focus because pressure, outcome fixation, and over-optimization lead to avoidance, fewer experiments, and missed learning opportunities. Those patterns quietly cancel the very behaviors that build momentum. You want practical steps, not pep talks. If this resonates, if you felt stuck by wanting success too hard, you'll see upcoming videos that dig into habit design, low-pressure experiments, and ways to measure progress without turning every moment into a verdict. Those episodes will walk through concrete examples and small shifts you can try next. If you'd like more of that, there will be more coming, and first I'd be glad if you stuck around to watch. Thanks for watching.